Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Pure Tinnitus and Hearing Podcast. Today we have a unique episode. We are going to have Isabel, who is from England, share her long international healing journey about how she recovered from her tinnitus.
Thank you so much. It's great to have this chat with you. So I started my tinnitus journey or ordeal, whatever you want to call it, in January 2016. I was utterly fine. I woke up one Saturday morning in January and I was, healthy, well, happy. I walked down to the cash point, like a plumber came around to my house, my flat. And within about 20 minutes of him arriving, my left ear started to feel really strange. And while he was busy at my boiler, I was Googling what's wrong with my ear. And why does it feel like a train is going through my head? And I suddenly then started not being able to stand up, and everything was going upside down, inside out, and I just couldn't function. So I got rid of the plumber really quickly. And I went back down to the chemist, which was near where the cash point was. And at this point, it's only 2 hours later, I couldn't walk. And the chemist, when I turned up, his voice had become so distorted that it didn't sound normal anymore. And I was putting my hands on his lips, I was drunkenly going to kiss him or something. And it's trying to work out what he was saying. But at the same time, his voice was booming, the bass was so loud, but I couldn't hear a word he was saying. I then went to a GP out of hours service, and there, every time I heard the sound, my whole body just crumbled like a building being demolished, like an explosion. I would just butter in a pan, I would melt onto the floor, and doctors had to get me off the floor, and I was just collapsed. But it was only when I heard a sound, any sound would make me collapse in that doctor's surgery. And everything was so crippling loud, the doctor typing on his keyboard sounded like a nuclear explosion. It was just incredible. So they prescribed steroids and antivirals. I went to a hospital at some point in this day as well, and I got steroids, antivirals, and I was told that on Tuesday I would have an appointment with the ears, nose and throat specialist. And then that weekend, I just went mental, vertigo kicked in. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't lift my feet off the floor. I had the worst fever and temperature. I had a rash all over my body. And all the time, this tinnitus just exploding in my left-hand side of my brain. Yeah, it was like an avalanche just ripping through my head. And then when I got to the hospital, at the ears, nose and throat hospital, they increased my steroids and said, come back in a week. So I live alone, and somehow I survived in this state for a week by myself. I don't know how I did it. I couldn't walk. I couldn't function. I couldn't eat anything. Anything I chewed would set off the tinnitus. I then went a week later. So it's now 11 days after first becoming ill, 11, 12 days. And I saw another doctor, and I was walking in a brace position, I was in a crash landing like that, and I couldn't lift my feet off the floor, and I was skating on the floor, and I was unable to function. They gave me a hearing test, and my left ear had lost a lot of hearing. And he said, you can't be on steroids anymore. You can't be on antivirals anymore. So you can just go home. And I was like, what? And it was we'll give you an MRI scan to see what's causing it, but the appointment won't come through for over 3 months. So goodbye. And I was just stuck, not knowing what to do. I kicked up such a fuss that he did prescribe in the end beta histine. Is that the correct
A beta
Be-
histamine. Yeah. So as a
yeah,
summary so far, you had sudden onset hearing loss with tinnitus, and that created also some vertigo and dizziness problems, correct? And so what
yeah,
happened?
yeah. So then he gave me that medication, and it works by draining the fluid off your ear, and some anti-dizzy meds. And over the next like 2 months, I could start to walk again. But I was walking in the brace position, um, and slowly my heels would lift off the floor. But I didn't have any more medical help. That was it for 3 months, just to get on with it. So I couldn't live like that for 3 months. So I then looked to alternative therapies to help me.
And before you started with alternative therapies, did you have a diagnosable hearing loss? Was there a recommendation to try something to treat hearing loss if you had that?
No, no, they gave me a hearing test, and it's only in one ear, and it's only partial hearing loss in the upper frequencies. So he said it's in the socially normal range. So you don't need anything.
Got it. Okay. And then you had these questions of, well, there must be something that can help me because it's hard to imagine living like that. So how did you approach your research and try these different alternative routes?
My first port of call was a cranial osteopath, because I was seeing her already. I had like years ago, I had a problem with my spine, and a vertebra popped out. And so I'd been having, monthly appointments for a couple of years to just make sure my spinal column was okay. And so I first went to her, and I walked through the door, and she was like, "Oh my God, what's happened to you? Like, I see you regularly. What's happened?" Um, and I saw her once a week for about 9, 10 months. And then we went down to twice a fortnightly appointments. And slowly, um, I could feel the difference after every appointment. It's a very gradual process. Um, I could just feel I could feel it working. So I knew that was something that benefited me. Like, there was a cause and effect. I felt awful. I'd go and see her. The next morning, I woke up and I'd feel like 0.5% better. And slowly, over a really long period of time, I started, to really benefit from that treatment.
Yeah, so tell us in a summary all of the different alternative treatments you've tried in that initial period for your
Okay.
tinnitus and
Yeah.
how they impacted your tinnitus.
Yeah. So that was osteopathy. Then there was acupuncture, which I saw with the first, like at the very beginning as well. I saw them weekly, but in truth, I never had that moment, and I never quite felt like it was working for me. But I went because I didn't know what else to do. Um, and the acupuncturist, though, was so knowledgeable about the healing system. So while I don't think acupuncture per se helped me, just all my conversations with him once a week about how to heal really helped. And he recommended this book, which I recommend to anyone who's struggling. It's a book called Spontaneous Healing by Dr. Andrew Weil. He's an American doctor who's very well known in alternative medicine. And he's a Harvard educated doctor who questioned the whole, Western medical style and looked deeper into what helps healing. And so when my acupuncturist recommended that, I gobbled it up, I read it, I learned it, and that set me off on a massive path of discovery. And one of his top tips is, one, don't take no for an answer. So I was like, that the Ears, Nose and Throat Hospital said no, there's nothing they could do. So I was like, I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm going to walk through every door available. every time someone recommends something, I'm just going to do it and see what happens. So my next port of call after that was homeopathy. My mum and my aunt both had positive homeopathic experiences. So I went along to a homeopath and it was incredible. I don't know if you know much about homeopathy, but they give you like these really tiny pills, like they're so tiny, and they go, take that and see what happens. And you think it's going to do nothing, but it can do like so much. Like I had a couple of remedies and there wasn't that much happened. But then in June, she gave me a new remedy and I took it. And that night, it was like I had vertigo again for the first time. And it was exactly the same experience as that first weekend when I got ill. And I was transported back into that mad psychedelic world. And then all my muscles, it just lasted one night. But then the next morning, all my muscles in my back seized up and I had like this massive detoxification. Like my urine smelled like I'd eaten 1,000 fields of asparagus. I was just like, what is going on here? My neck was burning. The next week I took another remedy and I was again transported back into that vertigo state. And when I saw my homeopath like a fortnight later, and I said, I've been so ill for like 2 weeks and I hate that remedy. She was like, this is very good. And I was like, why is this good? And she was like, homeopathy works by this thing called return of old symptoms. You have the right remedy when your body stores a piece of the illness which it hasn't been able to cure within your body. And so when you have the right remedy, that illness comes back out and it gives your immune system like a second chance.
Okay, so at this time, you're not only dealing with tinnitus, you're dealing with vertigo, tinnitus. So let's try
sound
to
distortion.
and
Sound
sound
distortion.
distortion.
Yeah.
So tell us, because everyone here who's watching or listening is
Yeah.
looking to gain some of your wisdom related
Yeah.
to the tinnitus. So
Yeah.
bring us forward here on how you were living with tinnitus and what you tried along the way and how long it took you to feel better by
Yeah.
different alternative routes.
Yeah. I wasn't coping. Basically, I was in my home, door locked, every single sound made me crumble. I had only allowed one visitor at a time because I couldn't cope with the sound of two voices at the same time. I didn't know what it was called, but I've since learned it's hyperacusis, and any sound would just freak me out. And I would find myself quivering, and it would feel like Mike Tyson was hitting me around the head by the sound of someone else's voice. I couldn't go into the office. I had to work from home. So I wasn't coping. None of these things. It was just a really long process. So the immune system and healing, you want it to be like that magic pill of, you have a headache, you take a painkiller. You get tonsillitis, you take antibiotics. 4 days later, you're better. It's not like that. It's so slow and gradual that I had these dramatic weeks, like with the homeopathy, but that just reduces the tinnitus a bit. But it's like the body knows then how to tackle the complaint and is a bit more clued up in fixing the problem. But it takes time. So I'm going to see a homeopath every 2 weeks. I'm going to see my osteopath once a week. And slowly, over the course of a year, I'm slowly being put back together again. And then in December, I turned to Ayurveda, which is India's ancient healing system. And that really, when I turned to Ayurveda within a month, after, on the back of all the other healing I'd done, you know, I was getting better, I was getting stronger. I still by this point haven't eaten in a restaurant or anything. But the brain fog lifted and I could start functioning again. So really slowly, over a year to 18 months, those 3 different modalities pieced me back together again.
And Isabel, knowing what you know now, what do you think was happening on a physiological level of your body? What was reorganizing? Typically with tinnitus, it's getting out of the fight or flight response and grounding the nervous system. And you had talked to me earlier before we started this
Yeah.
recording about some of those concepts. So
Yeah.
knowing what you know now, what was happening at that time?
Well, firstly, there was real physical problems. Like my cranial osteopath was like saying that everything felt like it had lurched to the right hand side of my body and was avoiding the left hand side of my brain with the crazy tinnitus, whatever's going on in there. So she was slowly inching things back so that everything could flow in the correct direction around my body. And if things aren't flowing correctly in your body, you've got no chance. When things flow, like energy and fluid flows in the wrong direction, it just, everything goes crazy. And I've learned now that tinnitus and stress traps you. So your nervous system has 2 states. You have the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight. And then you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and relaxation. And the immune system only works in the parasympathetic state, so in rest and relaxation mode. So I was just trapped in fight or flight response. Everything is really stressful. The tinnitus and hyperacusis make you scared out of your brain. It make, you know, and then I had this sound in my head, which was like an avalanche ripping apart my brain. So then I am obviously really paranoid and scared about that. The thought of leaving my home was so scary because I might encounter a dog that barks or something, and it would sound so amplified that I just became just paranoid about leaving my home. And so until I could get to that state of rest and relaxation and slowly come out of being trapped, I could start to heal. And that's what all those different modalities of healing was getting me towards, was slowly getting me into the parasympathetic nervous system where I could start healing.
And at that point, you're starting to feel changes happening in your body, the rest, relaxation, and you sought help from other professionals who are more body-based professionals. And you're also making changes to diet, trying supplements, not purely on your own, but with guidance. But maybe they're not supplements. So tell us about Ayurvedic science and the very basics of it for you, and then what happened the next year or so after that.
Yeah. Do you know anything about Ayurveda?
Yeah, I practice yoga, meditation, and I have a vegetarian diet, so I know there's the doshas and all of that. So in my understanding of Ayurvedic science, there's different body types, and we should be putting into our body different foods and inputs that are relative to our kind of body type. And it comes from ancient India. That's all I know.
Yeah, no, well, that's a lot. So I didn't know anything about it, you know, and it was just like I walked through that door and this whole world opened up to me. So without getting I'll try not to get technical with it, but Ayurveda, there are 3 different doshas, which every living thing is made up of in the planet. So human beings have these 3 different invisible forces in our body, just like, you know, how we know what time of day it is and when we're hungry, like these invisible forces in our body. And we have 3, and we may have a dominant one, but it's not about that. You've just got to be in balance. Everyone's got their unique balance. And for them, there's Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And when they get out of balance, the illness develops. And tinnitus is come about because of an imbalance in Vata. And so my Ayurvedic doctor like took my pulse and was like, oh yes, your Vata is all over the place. And so he prescribed a Vata reducing diet, which you can Google it and find out what a Vata reducing diet is. But in a nutshell, Vata is air. It's all up here, you know, and it's in your head, and it's air, it's flighty, it's creative, it's unreliable, it's erratic. And because it's all up here, it's sort of like dry and airy. You need to do the opposite. So you need to eat like oily food and creamy food to bring it down and drag it down. So you have to like drink hot milk with cinnamon in because it's hot and warming, and have a lot of oil. So you have to like do a daily oil massage. But again, the oil is just pulling down that airy Vata and grounding it. And then, you know, it was almost immediate. When I started doing that, I started to feel better. And the Vata craziness in my head started to reduce. So then once that had happened, I decided in my wisdom, like, you know, all best laid plans come out of nowhere. I was just like reading this Ayurvedic cookbook, which was written in Hawaii. And I thought, oh, well, obviously I have to go to Hawaii. So having not really left my house in 18 months, I decided just to get on a plane and go to Hawaii. So I quit. So it's a really long process to get to Hawaii. Obviously, I had to quit my job, rent out my flat, put everything into storage. So that was like a huge journey for someone with fatigue and sound sensitivity and tinnitus every time they move their head.
And how long had you been living with it at that point?
18 months.
So that's a long time. And some estimations would say if you're doing the right things, then by then you should start to feel a lot better. You were feeling somewhat better, but not where you thought you could get. Is that right?
I was feeling a lot better in 2017, but compared to a very low baseline. And I was in a vicious cycle. Like the idea of going to Hawaii broke me out of that cycle. So if I didn't have that idea, I wouldn't have quit my job, you know, and I managed to maintain a full-time stressful job. I went down to 4 days a week, but with this illness, I only had like hardly any time off. I had to work from home, but it was a really demanding job. I'm negotiating contracts for millions of pounds, having panic attacks every time I'm in a contract negotiation meeting at the sound of someone else's voice. You know, so I've got this really stressful job. And after every phone call, I'm like lying on the floor doing breathing exercises and wondering why I'm not getting better. So once I like found out about the parasympathetic nervous system, I'm like, my job is trapping me in illness. But I wouldn't have found out any of that if I hadn't turned to Ayurveda, because I had too much brain fog and I felt too ill. So it was all those slow chipping away. And then to be able to have 18 months off work and get you fully come out of that trap, you know, and to really relax, really take time, really go within and retreat into yourself and cut yourself off from all external stresses was a real privilege and really helped me. So I couldn't afford to stay in Hawaii for very long because it's so expensive. But after that, I found an Ayurvedic retreat in Hawaii, which was amazing. And then I went to India for a year and immersed myself in Ayurveda and Tibetan healing and absolutely anything, which if it had the word healing in it, I just tried it. And it became a bit of an obsession of just trying all these quirky things.
And was the main goal of this to improve your tinnitus?
Yeah, to get better, to be able to function, rebuild my life. Yeah, fully. And I think one of the major things which might help, people who live in hotter climates might have this, but people in colder climates, so much of socializing or indoor life happens indoors, and the acoustics indoors, sound reverberates. And that also traps you in that fight or flight response. So being able to live for 18 months, mainly outside. So all restaurants are outside, you don't eat inside, sound just disappeared in the breeze and it didn't bother me. And I think that just helped my nervous system just calm down. And I just wanted, while I was away, all I wanted to do, like my goal was to come home and be able to sit in a pub with a like music playing in the background. And I was just like, that is what I'm working towards, but I've got to be away to get there.
That's really powerful. So obviously you went to the extreme of go across the world and go on this extended retreat, self-discovery phase.
Yeah.
Not everyone has the time, resources to do that. So what advice would you have for someone who maybe lives in England or lives in a more urban area, wants to use some of these techniques that you've gotten better from, but doesn't have the resources to go on an extended vacation? What should they do, or what could they consider doing on an everyday or a weekly basis?
Spontaneous healing. At the end of this amazing book, they have it has 7 strategies for successful healing. So they're very generic, and I'll read them out, and it'll be really obvious in my story how when I first read these, I treated it a bit like an exam, and I wanted to tick each one off, and I tried really hard to do it, but actually it happened over a period of time. But I think I have more or less fulfilled each of the 7 stages, and you do not need to quit your life and do what I did. So the first one is don't take no for an answer, and that really powerfully believe that the human body doesn't want to be that ill. It doesn't want to be struggling. It's trying to get better. So you've just got to try and find whatever key is going to unlock that door for you. The next one is actively seek help. So, he gives some examples about ask questions, read books. He's like, write to authors, find people who know more than you do and really go above and beyond in trying to find out the answers of your condition. And I did do that quite a bit. The next one is seek out others who have been healed, and all these positive stories. You type into Google tinnitus, and I think it doesn't take long for the most popular search is does it go away? And you click on that and you just get horror stories of no, you'll never get better. So seek out all those positive stories of people who are now living a life with an auditory problem, which you can identify with and go, oh my God, I would be happy with that outcome. Find them and just, you don't even need to know how they got there, but just to know it's possible is so powerful. So it just the mind goes and the body follows. So if the mind believes that you can get better and there's hope, you will get there yourself. The fourth one is form constructive partnerships with health professionals. So just learn from people. Me and my alternative healers, I've learned so much. Like the fact that I'm quoting 4 years later from a book, acupuncturist told me to read, and acupuncture didn't really work for me, but I learned from him. So form those relationships with people and work out what you can absorb from them and apply them to your own life. The fifth one is don't hesitate to make radical life changes. So for me, that was what I did. For other people, that radical life change is going to look different. But something was probably wrong with the status quo. So you and you'll go on this long journey, be open to the journey, and then change what you then see as not working. I completely changed my outlook on my career, and I would not be negotiating £1 million contracts while having panic attacks at the same time. I would just tell my boss I'm not coping. But at that point in time, I was still like, I've got to do this. I've got to do this. Whereas now I'd be like, I can't do it. I've learned how to say no and my own limits. And the final two I struggle with slightly, but they're good. Regard illness as a gift and cultivate self-acceptance. And I put them sort of together when I reflect back in how I've achieved those things. And I see tinnitus and everything I've been through over the past 4 or 5 years as, well, I've just changed the way I see myself. And that's a really powerful thing. So I used to have a very clear idea in my mind that I was an organized, practical person. I structured my life around that concept. Whereas I always was kind of unsatisfied and angry. And I didn't understand why I was angry. And now I don't think I'm a very organized, practical person. I think I'm a little bit chaotic. And therefore, jobs which are very bureaucratic and stuff aren't really suited to me. And so I've now seen a different side of my character. I've been forced to look at how I was living my life. And I realized that the story I told myself just wasn't true, and now I've got a much clearer idea. And that is a gift. That is a real gift to understand that. So, and that comes with self-acceptance. So somehow I have, like, over 5 years, I have done all those strategies.
Well, thank you, Isabel, for sharing that. I mean, anyone who's listening, I know I've worked with many people as a tinnitus therapist that your story will resonate with many people, and it will resonate with and connect with people differently in different ways. Some who have just tinnitus, others who have sound sensitivity, hyperacusis, and tinnitus, others who may realize that their world, their lifestyle is high stress, and that they have not necessarily connected with this parasympathetic part of the nervous system. And for all of us, that term, parasympathetic nervous system, was foreign and strange. We had to learn it, myself included. So don't be scared to educate and learn about feeling relaxed, feeling calm, and how that can affect the nervous system, which indirectly improves the tinnitus. I want to allow you to take a few minutes to say anything that you haven't said already, and then we'll wrap up this podcast, episode 13.
Yeah, one of the things I'd say is just like, in your height of illness, believe that, and your moment of crisis, believe that change is possible. My mum came to visit me in 2016, and we were sitting on a park bench because obviously I couldn't be inside with her talking. So we're sitting on a park bench, and she said that she's a bit of a Buddhist, right? She turned to Buddhism years ago. So she's a bit, and she comes out with these like pearls of wisdom from Buddhism. And she said, everything changes. Think of your tinnitus as water. And water can be an ocean, it can be in a storm, it can, waves crashing against rocks. But then that ocean, the water evaporates, it goes up into the clouds, and then it turns into a raindrop. And that raindrop can nourish soil, or that raindrop can be, or that piece of water can be just an annoying drip in your kitchen tap, which you just forget about and you can't be bothered to get a plumber around to fix it. And it's like, nothing is certain in life but death, tax, and change. And she's like, and see your tinnitus as water and it will change. And I was just like, oh God, she's so annoying. Like, oh, with your Buddhism. But it stuck in my brain and it has changed. like now my tinnitus being that crazy avalanche to just this little annoying thing, which I'm sometimes aware of, and it annoys me, but it will change. I know it will change. And once coronavirus is over and I can see my osteopath, I go to my cranial osteopath again, it will change even more. Another thing my mum said in her Buddhism was, just like a snake, we have to shed our past. Just like a snake sheds its skin, we have to shed our past time and time again. We have to reinvent ourselves. So our old lives before tinnitus, we might have to reinvent ourselves to have a different life after tinnitus or with tinnitus. And that is just about self-acceptance, and we have to do it. And we don't have to fight it. We just accept it, and it will soon be not the ocean, but it will just be an annoying drip.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all this wisdom and your stories. And how about now? Have you in recent times, let's say before COVID, have you been able to be in a pub with friends with noise around you? Are you at that stage
Yeah,
yet?
I am. It wouldn't be on the top of my to-do list, but I have done it. And I have come home way too late. And I, just before COVID, like 2 weeks before, I went to see a friend who'd taken up stand-up comedy. So I thought that'd be a nice quiet night, you know? So I went up to upstairs room in a pub, and then we went downstairs, and the pub turned into a full-on nightclub rave. And I was like, this is a really bad idea. But I was having a good time, and I'd had a couple of glasses of wine. So I just stayed, and I got home at like 4 o'clock in the morning. And oh my God, my tinnitus was so bad the next day. But 2 days later, it was back to normal as nothing. And so I wouldn't want to repeat that experience. But that's the way the evening panned out. And I survived. And I had a good night.
Yeah. I wanted to bring that back because you said years ago that was your goal. If you could just be in a pub around noise and feel somewhat normal, then you would take that. And
Yeah.
I think that's really important to bring us back to this whole journey that you've been on. And I'm a hearing doctor. I'm an audiologist. I'm a tinnitus therapist. I have not worked with you one-on-one. You are not my patient. However, I do guide people on a
Mm-hmm.
similar journey. And I just wanted to remind anyone who's listening that I brought you onto this podcast so people could watch and listen to your story. You wanted to share this message to bring a positive spin, a positive outlook on how things can be, what can be done, and how sometimes we have to step outside of the typical medical system in order to feel better and to get better health in our body. So thank you, Isabel. Feel free right now to share with anyone listening or watching how they could find some of the blog posts you've written, or if you want to share anything else, please share. And thank you again for being on the Hearing
Thank
podcast.
you. Yeah, so in amongst the craziness, I started a blog because I needed to get my story out of me, and two, I was like, this has to help someone. So I started a blog, and it charts my first year of illness. I wrote lots of it in the height of that illness. I was like writing it in real time at points. And when I was in India, I finished it off. And I stopped writing it after a while for various reasons, which is explained in the blog. But it's there, it's a resource. People who find it on support groups often message me and contact me and say it's really helpful, and it made them laugh as well as some of the mistakes I made. So it's called RapunzelTinnitus.com. Rapunzel, because I was very much isolated, trapped in my flat with long brown hair, and I was just waiting for an escape, and I had to rescue myself rather than wait for Prince Charming. So RapunzelTinnitus.com. And I've also got a chapter in this book called The Girls Who Refuse to Quit. It's available on Amazon. It's volume 2. And what I'm really proud about this book is because I put tinnitus in a mainstream book, and it's like one of those unusual medical conditions people don't really know about. So it's in a mainstream book with 16 other stories about overcoming adversity. So if you're really at a low edge, you can read all the other stories about finding out how people have overcome the odds. But I'm really proud that tinnitus is in there. And raising awareness of how crippling the condition is. So those are resources, and people can contact me. I want to be that positive story. If that helps your own healing journey, I'm really happy. I have email exchanges, and I've had a couple of phone calls with other fellow sufferers to, just give that personal touch and tell people at that moment of crisis that what they're doing is okay, and and they're on the right track.
Thank you, Isabel. You've shared so much, and you've really opened your heart and shared your message to all of our audience here at Pure Tinnitus. And if one person can get one piece of positivity and encouragement to help them from this, then it will be definitely worth our time. So thank you for being on as a guest.
Thank you.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.